Good day, listeners. Welcome to another interesting episode of our program, Strategic Implementation in Action on Amorgate Radio Communication. I remain your host, Titilola Ogushono. Today, we'll be delving further into stakeholders management. We'll be considering reasons why change managers could encounter resistance from stakeholders, and we'll be looking at practical ways to manage such cases of resistance. Now, last episode, we looked at different types of stakeholders. We considered the internal stakeholders, the external stakeholders. We looked at their varying interests. Today, whether you like it or not, you will understand that some stakeholders would not want the change. Some stakeholders will not buy into the change immediately. And there could be a lot of factors responsible for this. It's not because they don't want the organization to grow. It's not because they don't see potential in the organization, but because there are some limiting factors that could be inherent in the system or even in individuals themselves that could be responsible for this attitude of not wanting to buy in the change process. Now, I want to look at some of these, resistance that you could encounter. The first one I want to look at is, interestingly, people do not want to change immediately. Now, people don't want disruption of their comfort zone. A lot of people are used to a particular routine, the way things are done. And some even have this phobia for a break in routine. So it's important as a change manager, when you notice any resistance from a particular stakeholder, you need to delve further, to know the reason for the resistance. You need to know the reason for that different opinion about the change process. Now, because most people are comfortable in a particular area, they see the change coming, the change process, as a disruption in their normal routine. And this, for some people, could be threatening. This, for some people, they might find themselves very uncomfortable. Now, some people are used to they have a plan in place, and are used to the operational plan, the day in, the day out. They have policies, processes in place that your change process is going to disrupt. So if you are going to disrupt their routine, you are going to disrupt their comfort zone where their expertise lies, their experience lies. I want them to go into another zone, a very unfamiliar zone. Definitely, you would encounter resistance from such a stakeholder. Now, another possible reason, why some stakeholders could resist the change process, that's why as a change manager, you need to delve further. You need to find, is what I call the fixed mindset. Now, some people just get stressed out from the method of change, whether it's pragmatic, whether it's the change process is just a bit of discomfort. They don't look at that. The method of change scares them off. So because they have this mindset that this is the way things are done, we've done this in a particular way over time. Now, because that mindset is fixed on that particular routine, it's going to be very hard to break that mindset. Now, I'll talk about the growth mindset. So the growth mindset sees possibilities. The growth mindset of an individual, if you have the growth mindset, you see change process as an opportunity to grow. Even if it's going to come with you acquiring new skill set, you don't see that as being discouraging. In fact, some people will even find that motivating because they're going to acquire new skills. So you need to find out, if the fixed mindset is where the problem is. So as a change leader, as a change manager, the responsibility lies on you, and on how to grow your people with that state of the fixed mindset to the growth mindset. Because as a gap, they are fixed on the way things are done. They see the impossibilities. So how do you move your people, your stakeholders, from the point of being fixed and seeing impossibilities to the point where they see the possibilities and they're ready to grow? Sometimes the reality is that some people resist that change due to peer pressure, and that takes into organizational politics. Now, as an individual, maybe a team player or a team lead, I'm not against the change process, but nobody operates in isolation. I'm in the finance unit, and the change strategy is going to affect my friend who is in production. Now, the change process, I'm okay, does not affect me negatively, quote and unquote, as someone in finance, but it's going to affect my friend who is in the production unit. So because it's going to affect my friend in the production unit, and because of our relationship, our social beings, okay, because our relationship, now he or she might not pressure me, okay, so that I can take either aside and truncate and frustrate the change process. So you need to understand the dynamics. You understand that we are social beings and we have relationship with one another in the workspace. So sometimes resistance, experienced from a particular set of stakeholders, more often than not, could come from pressure, okay, of another group of stakeholders that might be affected negatively by the change process. Interestingly, sometimes people are just afraid of change. People are just afraid to change. They are afraid of displacement. They are afraid of what the future holds. And that's why that's a major reason because that's why fear would hibernate is when people are not clear about the change process. It's when you have not communicated the change objective. It's when you have not carried them along. It's at the point of not involving them in the change process. Because when fear, and the fear could be based on the fear of loss of job, sometimes the fear of relocation. Some people are accustomed, they live their whole life in a particular place, and the change process might mean that they have to leave that continent to another continent, and the fear comes from that. Okay, so it's not because people don't want the change process, but these are factors that will influence why people will resist the change process. So you need to understand this so that it helps in how you communicate the change process, in how you formulate your policies, your processes, that will carry everyone along. Okay. Now, in reality, you can't carry everybody along, but at least a majority of the people along. Another factor that could make people resist the change is what I call poor reward system. Now, in reality, for instance, I'm going to cut if you're, like I said, if earlier on, the last episode, if your strategy is what we want to do is to, reduce our cost of operations by 30%, it means that it's going to have different meanings to different people. Now, you better sit down as a change manager, as a change leader, to find out how do you reward your stakeholders. Now, you can't tell people to give up everything for nothing. You can't tell people to give up A, B, C without thinking of how to compensate them, which could be in form of financial reward, could come in form of non-financial reward, it could come in form of bonuses, incentives, as the case may be. But you must make sure that when you are bringing up a change agenda, you must look at appropriate reward system. You must look at how to incentivize your people. You must look at how to make them feel that the change process, the sacrifices they are going to, make is worthwhile, will be worthwhile. It's very important, okay? And you need to understand that you cannot deploy the same reward system to all stakeholders. You have different stakeholders, they have varying interests, so you have to look at all your classes of stakeholders and find out how best to compensate them, how best to reward them. Okay, this is very important. And again, sometimes, more often than not, like I have said, is communication gap. When you fail to communicate effectively, when you do not have a corporate communication strategy in place, when you do not communicate, when you do not plan your communication process, your change communication strategy well, that are going to be breakdown in communication. And when there's breakdown in communication, it creates fear. When it's breakdown in communication, people don't get involved. They don't feel a part of it. They can't trust the process. And then you cannot even get engagement, ownership, commitment for your team members from your stakeholders. So it's very important that you plan your communication strategy. You ensure that there is no breakdown in communication. You even plan your communication channels. How best you get to this category of stakeholders that you have. Okay, and sometimes we always say that you could even have multiple channels of communication, even to a particular stakeholder that you have identified. Now, sometimes, like I said, a breakdown in communication leads to lack of trust. And when people cannot trust you, it means that they don't find you reliable. When they don't find you reliable, you can't even get their commitment. You can't even earn their ownership. If you cannot earn that trust, there's nothing you can get from them. So it's very important that you look at this. Then, when you are introducing a change process, another thing that is very crucial is that you look at the timing. Okay, now we know that this is the change agenda, this is the strategy, but the time of implementation is very crucial. Timing is crucial. You need to even look at the economic dynamics of the environment. Now, a particular country cannot be going through a major change, okay, agenda that is affecting standard of living, that is affecting cost. Now, if we have rising inflationary pressure, you have to be careful, as a change leader in organization. So if you are going to implement anything that will put more, hardship on your people, you're going to resist it. If the inflationary pressure has moved from rates from like a digit, 8%, to about 2 digits, 15%, and you're now saying you want to rise size, or you're not trying to implement, reducing cost in terms of a slash in salary, maybe a 20% reduction in their salaries or wages, as the case may be, then you are going to not get the buy-in immediately of your stakeholders, because already at the macro level, there's inflationary pressure which has affected their purchasing power, and you're now coming in at that same time to implement this. You are going to not, in fact, it will be concerted resistance for virtually all your stakeholders, and this would eventually frustrate the change agenda. So it's important that these causes, of resistance should be looked into. You need to be able to delve further, on how or what are, it's going to be peculiar. For some people, like I said, it's fair. For some people, it could be organizational politics. For some people, like I said earlier, it could be communication gap, fixed mindset, peer pressure. So once you identify which of these, factors are responsible for the resistance, and among your stakeholders, they can know how best to handle. If you are just joining us, thank you so much for joining. It's still our program, Strategic Implementation in Action on AMOGET Radio Communication, and I'm still your host, Titilola Ogunshono. Thank you for joining. If you are just joining, we are just speaking to the possible resistance from stakeholders. Why would your stakeholders resist the change? Okay, this is what we have spoken to, and I'm moving on to talk about what are those possible ways, practical ways, of resolving this resistance from stakeholders. Now, I would say the first thing you need to do not assume that you know, okay? The first practical step to solving, after identifying the factors responsible for their concerns, from these resistances, displayed by various stakeholders, the first step is to listen. Listening is an art. It's very important that you listen, okay? It's so important. I cannot overemphasize that you must engage them. Get them to talk. You must listen to them. You must listen to your stakeholders in order to understand their perspective, okay? Because when you hear them, when you listen to them, it allows you to identify what their needs are, allows you to know what their expectations are, allows you to know what their interests are. And again, which is very important, it allows you to know what their fears are. When you know what their fears are, then you can adequately plan on how to resolve this issue, on how to allay these fears. Now, it's important, because the truth is, you need to understand their interpretation or perception of the change. I remember once when we had to introduce a new strategy plan, and it was an organization I had to work on a consulting project. And the organization beforehand didn't have a structured performance management system in place. Now, when we came in, as a lead consultant back then, they had their fears. It was like, why bring in consultants? Are you trying to disrupt what we've been doing? Are we saying we've not been appraising people well? So the first thing we had to do, which we told top management back then, is let us meet with your people. Now, the perception of what the problem, what top management thought the problem was actually different from what the problems were when we engaged the stakeholders. The management felt that the issues were quite different, that people were not committed, that people were not interested in growth, that people were adamant. But after meeting with the stakeholders, realized that was not the case. They had their own views. They felt sidelined. They felt they were not carried along. there were communication gaps. They realized that there was no synergy, a lack of synergy among various units that was affecting, frustrating the overall corporate goals. Okay, so in reality, realize that sometimes as top managers, as change leaders, you think you know what the problems are. Okay, so if you are going to introduce a change process, you need to listen to them. How do they view the change process? What are their expectations? What are their fears? So that you can find practical steps to allay these fears. Now, you will understand that you need to their own interpretation or perception of the change. When we came up with performance management framework, institutionalizing performance management framework, their own interpretation was different from ours. So after liaising with them, listening to them, after those breakout sessions with them, strategic sessions with them, brainstorming sessions with them, they realized that what we are bringing up board was something that was beneficial to all parties. So it's important that you listen. As simple as that sounds, listening is very powerful. You need to listen to them. Listen to their own interpretation or perception of the change. Now, it's important. Now, there are different levels of listening. Okay, different levels of listening. From the Summer Comfort 2013, we have the superficial, the factual, empathetic, and generative levels of listening. 4 levels according to them. Now, I would tell you that when you are listening to them, you must be empathetic. I call it empathetic listening. Now, you must get to a point where you put yourself in their shoes. Yes, you are the change leader. You are implementing this change agenda. But for once, let's go to the other side of the table and put yourself in the shoes of the employees. Put yourself in the shoes of the creditor. Put yourself in the shoes of the community. Put yourself in the shoes of the investors. So when you put yourself in their shoes, it gives you a different perspective, a different focus, and it makes you understand how they feel. So understanding how they feel will really help you, because it allows you as a change leader to discover their pain points. It allows you as a change leader to understand their preferences. And when you can understand their pain points, when you can understand what their issues are, when you understand what their challenges are, when you understand what they prefer, it helps you more inclusive agenda. So they can look at it from your side. So, okay, if these are the issues they are having, how do I factor this into implementation? It really helps you. Now, after listening, the second thing I'm going to mention is that you must understand that business processes or not. Agenda would either have a positive impact on the present business processes or even sometimes negative impact on our business processes. Now, let's take for instance, you have your creditors, you have your bankers, you have your customers, your clientele base. When you are institutionalizing, implementing a change agenda, you need to understand, okay, this change agenda, how would it affect my creditors? How would it affect my clientele base? How would it affect my customers? How would it affect my employees? How would it affect my managers? When you know how it's going to affect them, it helps you to plan. You need to understand, I will say that, look, I want to come to you. I must come to you from an informed perspective. Before coming to you with the change agenda, I would have looked at your business processes. So when you are coming to me, you are saying, look, this change agenda will not going to work. I'm already telling you, I know that these are your key business processes. I know that these are the challenges you could encounter. However, in the long run, if we work this path with us, these are the advantages that would accrue to your business if we implement this change. Now, everybody understands, I call it the wifing principle. What is in it for me? I'll take it again. Everybody goes with line with the wifing principle. What is in it for me? So if we want to, get my buy-in as a stakeholder, it comes from an informed point of view of understanding my business processes, understanding how that change agenda would benefit me, whether in the short run or in the long run, as the case may be. And also you even understanding what might affect my business process like negatively a bit or tweak it and make me modify my business processes, and you get my buy. Even from the point of view that I know that you have analyzed my business process, you can get my buying more easily. Okay? Then I will also say the third point is you must involve them. Involve your stakeholders. It's important that you involve them early in the change process. You don't wait till we're at the tail end of the change agenda. No. Like I said, when I took on the consulting work, I said we need to involve the stakeholders. I have to identify the stakeholders. I have to do my mapping of the stakeholders. I have to engage them in breakout sessions, brainstorming sessions. Because I involved them early, it was really easier. I made my job easier in implementing the change agenda because I got their buy-in. Okay, when you involve them early, what it does for you is that, look, we are having people from different fields. So already we have that bank of expertise, that bank of experience. So, and these, they will come to share their opinions. Interesting when you involve them early. Instead of them resisting, it's a proactive approach to prevent resistance. They can share their opinions, they can share their concerns, and they can give you feedback, which is very key. You must give that, and they will give you feedback. Now, I want to say that each time when we are giving feedback, we need to acknowledge the various contributions that you have gotten. Now, that's what I've done. I work in a particular project. I get feedback from 40, 50 people. Already there's a mechanism I put in place where I acknowledge every feedback, every comment that I get, every question asked. And when they ask questions, the feedback, you should give timelines. You must respond to them immediately. If not immediately, as soon as possible. I would even say, look, I have a feedback mechanism where you respond within 24 hours or even 48 hours, as the case may be. Now, I want to give you different suggestions. In reality, you can accommodate all of the suggestions, but to get that buy-in, to get to get them to the place where they can own the process, I would advise that you must find a way to incorporate at least one or two of their suggestions. That's what I do. I work here to implement maybe a reward management system, as the case may be, recruitment selection process, institutionalize anything like that. I even talent management, attraction management strategy in an organization. I take that suggestion and I find a way to incorporate maybe just one or two. What this does for you is that it makes them feel valued, and when they feel valued, it creates a sense of ownership. And when they create that sense of ownership of the process, I'm telling you, if it's not going to eliminate resistance totally, it's going to reduce resistance to your change implementation agenda. This is very important. Now, you have listened to them, you have taken your time to understand their business processes, you have involved them so that they can participate in the process. It's now important for you to communicate to them. So you must look at communication. Talking about communication, you must have, I would say, a communication plan in place. I ask yourself one or two questions. What is your objective? I want to communicate to my various stakeholders. What is my objective? What am I communicating? And why am I communicating this information? Am I communicating this information to inform them? Am I communicating this information to enhance relationship? Am I communicating this information, to get feedback or negotiate? It depends. So you must have that objective in mind. And you must understand that when you are communicating, you must choose the best channel, for communicating to each stakeholder. For your employees internally, your owners of business, how do you want to communicate to them? For your external stakeholders, how do you want to communicate to them? You have different classes of stakeholders. How do you want to communicate to them? And it's really important. And in addressing stakeholders' resistance and concerns, you need to communicate in a very clear, concise, and consistent manner. Your mode of communication, your message that will be communicated, must be communicated in a very clear, concise, and consistent manner. I would advise, and I say it a lot, when you talk about communication plan, you must use simple and concise words, Avoid jargon. I know that there are terminologies, for each profession, terminologies. I'm not an organization expert. I'm not an engineer or project manager or an HR person. Or even an accountant. Use simple terms that everybody can understand, because the essence of communication is for the recipient to understand the message clearly. Okay, so please, you must also ensure to use multiple channels of communication. Is important. You must find out the best channel to communicate your message to each stakeholder. Okay, and you must give room for feedback. You must give room for feedback, because when they can feed you back, when they can give you information about that concern, then you can entertain this feedback, and you must so that you can and this will help you. And I always say that you must address that concerns in a timely manner. When people express their concern, like I said, there must be a time frame when you have to respond to them. This is very important. You must communicate to them in a very clear way. It's important. Now, I will say that if you have communicated to them, you have feedback from them, what do you do next? The truth that you need to do is that, because any change agenda might result to, it might not be a comfortable place for them. Now, if you are going to change, sometimes it's innovation, want to get more innovative. It means that you might have to change your IT process, for instance. It means that you are going to get more sophisticated, your tools, or if you are in production industry, a production firm, tools of production. So it means that their present skills level might need to be upskilled. It means that some people might need to go for formal training. So if that is where you come in as a change leader. As a change leader, you must be prepared to provide adequate support, when and where needed. It must be adequate, because you need to know what are the skills gap. Now, this is where you as an organization, that is where you're going as an organization, there'll be this gap there. And how do you bridge this gap? So you need to support the change process by supporting your stakeholders. And this will come in the form of training. It will come in the form of even coaching. It will even come in the form of resources. Do you want to help them? If it's going to get more sophisticated and you need them to up their game, do you want to deploy your people to train them in terms of IT? You should know how to do these interventions. Okay, so you need to look at the appropriate intervention and you need to put in place, and this must be done in a very timely manner. Okay, because it's really important that you do this, deploy these resources to support your stakeholders, because it makes the change process easier for them to adapt. This is very important. And I would also say, when people make effort, I believe so much in stretch goals. When you have stretched them, they are putting effort. You need to recognize their effort. You need to recognize improvement that have been made. You need to recognize achievements, milestones that have been made by your people. You need to recognize them, and you need to find a way to celebrate them. Also, celebrate your people. It's not about money. You must find out what will motivate them. Recognize them, celebrate them, and reward them. Reward them adequately. Look at what would motivate them. Look at what kind of reward they would want. Okay, please, it's important when people make that. When people put in effort, when people put everything they have got into it, it's important to celebrate them. Okay, thank you so much for staying tuned. Well, we'll be speaking to the ways of managing stakeholders' resistance. And I said it's important to support them through different interventions. We could come in terms of training, coaching, even deploying resources to support stakeholders in the change process. Okay, and also I will go to the last point, which is important to review and monitor your progress. Whatever interventions you have put in place to help your stakeholders to get more engaged, it's important that you review the support system. It's important that you monitor, because what you do not monitor cannot get improved on. You need to monitor these interventions. You need to check if these interventions have been effective. This is very important that you do. And I would give us the last one, which says you need to negotiate with them. Negotiation and agreement. Now, the truth is, If you are telling your stakeholders to give up A, B, C, to give us some things for you for the change process, you also in turn must be ready to also give up some things for them. So you cannot decide on what to give up, okay? You can't decide on what they want. You must come to that table of negotiation where they let you know what they need in order to achieve your change objective. And you also, as a change leader, must come to the point where you have to look within your system and look at where do we even have to, at what point do we need to give some things up for us to achieve our change objective. So you need to negotiate. Once you negotiate with them, and that comes from the process of feedback, okay? They tell you what they want. Yes, you've communicated with them, you've involved them, but they will also tell you what they want. Now, for some people, they'll tell you what we actually need is for us to even have maybe additional, give us 2 more days or 3 more days of vacation, and it will help us. Some will tell you that what we need is, why don't you even subsidize, even subsidize trainings. We want to go for training programs in this particular field of that. Why don't you give us 20% of the, or even 50% of the cost of the training fee? So these are things you come look at it together at the negotiation table. And it's important that when you negotiate with them and you agree on some terms, please, you need to honor your agreement. Okay, this is very important. Thank you so much for staying tuned. I would leave you with the words of Shao Yor. I like this very well. He says the best way to minimize disagreements is to make sure that all the stakeholders are in the room. The best way to minimize disagreements is to make sure that all the stakeholders are in the room. Okay? For comments, feedback, questions, kindly send a mail to contact@theamorgate.org. I'll take it again. You have any questions for us, feedback, comments, kindly send a mail to contact@theamorgate.org. Well, thank you so much for staying tuned to the end of our program. Kindly click the like button if you have learned anything from today's episode. Well, same time, same station next week. Stay blessed till then.